Okay, we are now recording, and that means that the public needs to know, if they're here, that they are subject to being recorded. And I still don't have any more participants, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
Attendees, is this a 0? I think so.
I can't see it.
We're too nearsighted. Yeah,
Okay.
we're too nearsighted to read the numbers. Okay.
This is a rescheduled regular meeting for the month of December 13th. And our members appear to be all present. Carl, welcome.
Yeah,
by the
thank
way.
you. Thank you.
And Elaine.
Yep.
And Janet, welcome.
Thank you.
Barry. And June. We're all present. So I call this meeting to order at, what is that, 7:08?
7:04.
7:04 p.m. Monday, December 13th, 2021. Can you hear me with my mask on?
Yes, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, great. The first item on the agenda is to approve or not the minutes for November. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve. I move to approve.
Okay, Elaine, second?
Second.
Okay, and all those in favor, or is there any discussion? All those in favor to approve the minutes?
Pedro, aye.
Elaine, aye.
Carl, aye.
Janet?
I was not present at the meeting.
Oh, okay,
I would approve
can
it if I had to
abstain.
choose.
Yeah,
okay, June, aye. Okay. You'll have to excuse me once in a while. I have to take the minutes, so. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the budget. Elaine, would you speak to that, please?
Well, we're only supposed to, we're not supposed to increase it more than, 2.5%, which would be like $15 to our budget. So I think we should just go with the $600 that we've been doing. And in the meantime, we'll have to make them aware that eventually we're going to have more in the budget for maintenance, et cetera. Either we are or the selectmen are.
There's a motion.
Okay, so do you want to read the motion?
we,
Yeah, so they can find it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for the budget.
Yes. That's what I'm looking for.
we have been, 100 of that has been for advertising in case we have hearings under the demolition delay bylaw. And then the 500 has been in other supplies, I think it is.
Archival.
That doesn't mean we can't spend bits of it other ways, but that's what we've asked for that's what we asked for last year.
I'd like to make a motion. Oops, sorry. Can I make a motion?
Yes, Carl.
Okay, thank you. Make a motion that the commission adopt for its FY23 budget the sum of $600 and that the treasurer forward said budget to the town administrator by December 15th, 2021.
Okay, second.
Yep, second.
That should be to the town accountant. That should be to the town accountant.
Actually, it's to the administrator these days, Barry, I believe. That's where I've been submitting mine. I can
The
change it.
orders that came in were that we should submit everything to the accountant and she would make the copies for the administrator.
Okay.
I'd like to amend the motion to change, I'd
Instructions.
like to change to the motion to change it from town administrator to town accountant.
Second,
Okay. All those in favor? We need a roll call vote. Sorry, I forgot that the first time. Carl,
Yes,
Elaine,
Elaine, yes, yeah.
and Janet.
Without discussion, I really don't understand the issue, so I'm going to pass on that.
Okay, Barry
aye.
and June, aye. Okay. We have several categories to talk and vote about underneath the Bullard House heading. And the first one is an invoice to pay Cronenberger.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to request that the select board approve the use of mitigation funds in the amount of $19,960. Pay invoice number 1 submitted by Cronenberg and Sons Restoration, Inc., quoted, dated December 2nd, 2021, for sill replacement at the Bullard House. The commission's vote to pay the invoice is contingent upon the Berlin Building Inspector's signing off on the project. When we met informally last week, I had some photographs of the work that they performed. I stopped by the Bullard House 5 or 6 times during the process. It's my opinion that they have satisfied their contractual obligation. I did check the contract. There is language in the contract that our town administrator issued that clearly stated that the contractor was required to interface with our building inspector during the process of the work.
Okay.
I spoke to the building inspector. Gee, I'm getting no thing now.
You're reverberating?
I spoke to the building inspector today.
Yeah.
And he has not received a call to go and inspect. They have the permit and so forth, but he has not received a call to go and inspect. So he has not yet inspected it.
Well, that's why the motion says subject to the, well, let me get the language.
Yes,
Contingent.
it's contingent, sure.
Yeah, so I would recommend if you all agree that we forward this to the town administrator and let her take the necessary action to interface with the building inspector, and he's got to do what he's got to do to get it signed off, I guess.
Okay, so you want, well, we need to vote on the motion and then it can be forwarded to Margaret.
Yep.
Okay, so we need a second. I don't think we had a
I
second.
thought I
for the-
seconded it.
You said.
I meant to if I didn't.
Okay, so it's, motion is seconded and our discussion preceded that. So we need a vote. Carl,
Yes,
Elaine,
Yes,
and Janet,
Yes,
and Barry,
Aye,
and June, aye. Okay, yeah, it's a unanimous vote. And I will, let's see, Elaine, do you want to forward that to
Yes,
Margaret then?
we can do
we
that.
can do that.
Yeah. no worry.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm wondering, Elaine, do you want to say anything to the contractor about inspection?
Well, I think Margaret will do that, right? Or-
I think it's up to the building inspector. He's got the building permit. He's going to get a bill to sign off on, and I don't know that we should get in the middle of that. It is what it is.
He's not going to be involved in the contract, in the money business, in the bill paying. He's going to be involved in an inspection, but we want the inspection done before the bill's paid.
Yeah, he has to sign off before Margaret's going to pay the bill. That's what our motion says, I believe.
Okay, so our responsibility is to, now that we have voted to pay contingent on the building inspector signing off, our responsibility is to forward that invoice to Margaret. And you and Elaine will do that?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. The next little item or big item under the Bullard House is the replacement of the threshold.
I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion to request that the select board approve the use of mitigation funds in the amount of $750 to replicate and install a new threshold at the front door of the Bullet House as quoted by Cronenberg and Son Restoration Inc. Inc.'s quote dated December 1, 2021.
Is there a second?
Yes, second that.
Any discussion here?
Was
So I
the
just-
quote,
Go ahead. I'm sorry,
was
go
the
ahead, Barry.
quote, was the quote specific that it was only the one threshold or was the two?
Just
I
one.
kinda thought they were talking about two,
No, just the front threshold.
just the one?
Yes, sir. So just an observation, when I was there, they had already removed the original threshold and it was pretty much completely deteriorated and moss growing all over it.
Yeah.
You know, they did the reasonable job on the other work, so I have a reasonably high degree of confidence that they can, you know, do this task. We spelled out when we requested the quote from them that they use a good hardwood, either mahogany or oak or equivalent, that it be primed with an oil-based primer, and that it be painted again with an oil base with, and we mentioned the color gray just to be sort of neutral. We need to have a finish on it, so color doesn't really matter at this time. You know, eventually it's going to get all painted at some point, but we need to protect the new wood. So that was the point.
I just want to ask a couple questions.
Sure.
Is there an inner threshold that was an issue or you?
No.
No. Okay, so two thresholds. I just wanted to follow up on your question about two thresholds.
Oh, I was talking about the other door, the
Oh,
other
the other
door at the
door.
corner of the house.
Okay,
I don't know why, I just had it in my head that it was gonna be for two, that's all.
okay,
And of course, they flashed that with copper where the new threshold goes and so forth, so.
Yeah, the copper's in place already. Yeah.
It's already there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that with the new storm door that was put on there this year, that will also tend to protect the new threshold somewhat from weather.
okay. Okay, do we need to do we need to be specific about the details when we inform them about doing the threshold or not?
Well, the way this has worked in the past, on other projects that we've had, I have written statements of work for Elaine to pass on to Margaret. And we probably should write and make it clear what we anticipate for the 750. And it'd be basically what I mentioned about being a hardwood, being properly painted. And I can pass that on to Margaret along with our approval if we're going to go forward with this to her. And then she can make the award as she has done in the past.
Okay.
What the original request for a quote had all those things in it, you said?
No. Well, let me back up. They had mentioned it needed replacement, and then they asked to go forward, and we sent in an email saying, okay, give us a quote. And I set forth in that email to make sure that it was going to be a hardwood such as mahogany or oak, and that it was going to be properly primed and properly painted. Then they responded with a quote. So technically that's been documented, but we can be more specific for Margaret to make the award.
Yeah, I would suggest that you give Margaret a copy of that when she makes the award so that she can incorporate it.
We may have done that already, and if not, that would be my intent.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a moment here. Okay. Okay, we have a motion. Did we second the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Carl,
All right.
Elaine,
Elaine, aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Barry,
Aye.
and June, I. Unanimous. Okay, the next item is the cellar stairway replacement.
I'd like to make a motion. Sorry.
I just want to find my copy here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay,
I got three.
all right.
I'd like
Did
to
you
make a
want
mo-
You want to move?
Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
This computer stuff's awkward.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to request that the select board approve the use of mitigation funding in the amount of $3,000 for purposes of installing, installing to local and state building codes, a set of pressure-treated stairs from the billet house first floor to the basement, including any required handrails. And a recommended contractor would be Squaw Hollow Restoration.
For Margaret's, yeah.
We'll get to that discussion.
Is there a second
Second that.
discussion?
I met with the building inspector prior to our informal meeting last week in anticipation of this coming up. And we discussed the motion I just made. In summary, he agrees that there is a need for the stairs to the cellar. He had no problem with the article, or motion rather, as written. With respect to the monetary amount, he believes it should be able, the task should be able to be accomplished well within that sum of money. In fact, it should be less, but we're better off going in with the higher number. This number I came up with. It's a pure guess on my part, and he thinks we should use that number at the present time. There are some uncertainties here. Price of lumber continues to escalate daily almost. Secondly, it may not be possible because of the limited opening of the cellar well area. It may not be possible to have a straight run to meet codes and everything. And there may be need for a platform. So it'll be a run and a platform and then another run to the basement floor, potentially. We won't know this until the contractor has to look at it and come up with an approach to it. The other thing we discussed also, you're aware that sometime in the future, we'll be most likely installing a cement floor into the basement. So in the statement of work for this task, we would include a requirement that the contractor put at the bottom of the runners of the stairwell 4-inch cement blocks. So these stairs won't be right on the ground. They'll be on 4-inch blocks. When it comes time to pour the concrete floor, the stairs have to be just lifted slightly and the blocks removed, and the cement floor can be poured under the steps. And then steps forward again and beyond the cement floor. Well, that's basically it, as I discussed with the building inspector. I've also had an opportunity to go over most of these documents with Margaret before our meeting of last week, our informal meeting of last week. She has no problem with the amount of money and understanding how we arrived at it. She also suggested that since Tim has been working there these days, and because of the monetary value is under 10,000, she could just make an award to Squaw Hollow.
Okay, anything else? So,
I would express the opinion that there's no way we can do this to the code, building code basis, because the space is much too small for that.
I would agree
And I think that, therefore, I think that rather than make this kind of a motion, I would like to have a proposal that we act on rather than asking for an appropriation of money before we've got a proposal. This is a very tricky spot. It's very limited in overhead height. The old stairway had risers of approximately 9-10 inches. And it was very steep, and there really isn't much room to dicker with that an awful lot because of the limited overhead height, the limited space in the overhead height. I really would rather have a proposal on it that has been created based on the knowledge of the space.
would that
Uh,
come
I-
from Tim?
It could.
Excuse me,
Tim could make that proposal?
Sure.
can I speak, please?
Yes.
Well, thank you. Okay, so this was basically discussed with the building inspector. And as I said earlier, it is acknowledged that the contractor may have to get waivers to meet code. And the building inspector doesn't have any issue with that. We'll be just adding additional timeline by, going out and get quotes first. I mean, we can write a statement of work. This is not a big deal. The building inspector indicated it's probably 1 day's work. And the builder will have to come up with a design, subject to the building inspector's approval. So I don't know why we need to add an extra layer on such a small task here. This is not a big deal to put a stairwell in. It is limited space, that's acknowledged. And that's why we've identified the possibility of the need for waivers, which the building inspector fully agrees with.
So basically, if we ask Tim Walhuter, we would be relying upon his judgment. Well, I mean, we wouldn't review what he decided to do. We would just go with it.
Set of stairs, it's got to meet codes, or he needs to get waivers from codes. He can't do it arbitrarily or unilaterally. He'll come up with a design. If he determines that his design doesn't meet code, he's going to have to go forward to the building inspector and say, I need a waiver because, whatever the reasons are. He won't just be able to unilaterally throw a set of stairs in and walk away and say, here's what you get. He has to comply. He has to get a building permit, at least get the building inspector involved. This is a low risk item as far as I'm concerned. That's not a lot of money.
Okay. There's a motion, and I believe it was seconded. So we need to take a vote. Carl?
Yeah, could I just say one more thing before we vote?
Sure.
It's really critical that we get a set of stairs in as soon as we can by a contractor who can do a good job. I mean, we had a fire alarm company over there a few weeks ago. They had to go down a hazardous step ladder. The furnace could quit on us any night. No one knows. We have to call somebody at 3 in the morning to come start the furnace up. We can't have a technician bringing vacuum cleaners, toolboxes, and whatever, and making multiple runs up and down the cellar on a ladder that is not very stable. So it's relatively critical that we get a good set of stairs in as soon as possible, just for those reasons. So I'm sorry to interrupt your request for vote, but I think that's important to recognize.
Okay, let's take a vote then, unless there's anything else. Carl,
I'm in favor.
Elaine,
Aye.
and Janet,
Aye.
Barry,
No,
June, aye. The motion passes. Okay, the next item would be just at this point, acknowledgement that Tim Walhuter is in the process, I don't think he's completed yet, of opening up of the repaired floors in the Bullard House. I've talked to him a couple of times. The first time was very early on, maybe the first day that he was there, and he invited me to sit down and look at some of the flooring and what he was working on at that time, which was trying to see how the kitchen floor was tied into the room adjacent to it. The other time, Marty and I brought him a little computer so that he could see all the images that we have for the renovations. And that, I think, has been helpful to him. Anything else?
Just for Janet's purpose, just to bring her sort of up to speed, okay? I don't know if you're aware, Janet, but some months back, perhaps years back, a year or two, whatever, the town hired Tim Mulheater to do a survey of the Bullard House. He wrote a report regarding his findings on what needs to be done to make the building structurally sound. He was limited as to what he could do at that time with the funding that was provided, because he couldn't access certain areas under the floors at the Bullard House to assess what may or may not need to be done there. So as a result of that, he was awarded a contract in September. This is the contract right here to, I know you can't read it, sorry, but just to expand upon the original study. It's not to exceed amount of $2,500 for purposes of providing a supplement to his prior study, giving us his findings in the form of a written document and photos and price estimates for anything that may or may not have to be accomplished. So I just wanted to bring Janet up to speed on that so she was aware of it.
Okay. Janet, any questions about what Tim is doing, Tim Walhuter is doing?
I think I understand from what was just said.
Okay,
And
okay. All right, the next Bullard House item is based on a request that Carl made before our first scheduled regular meeting last Wednesday, and that's the relocation of non-essential items. Is that still something you want to discuss and vote on, Carl?
Yes, I think it's worthy of discussion. As you know, June, you and Elaine have been working for the last 3 years or so, mostly in the fall and the winter, sorting out what could be disposed of in the Bullard House and what needs to be preserved. And there's still a lot of items there. Again, for Janet's purpose, I'll just mention that in the status report that I mentioned when we had the other discussion, the survey, let me just find it here. Just going through some papers here for a second, folks, just to get the document. Okay, here it is. So this is Tim's original survey document that I had mentioned earlier that he's in the process of supplementing. It's dated December 4th, 2020. So in this document, as I mentioned, he outlined all the various areas that need to be addressed at the Bullet House. His very first item was securing the outside shell and making it weatherproof, and we've taken action to do that by installing storm windows, storm doors, etc. So that was accomplished. His second item was the removal from the building of any material not absolutely necessary for actual work being performed. And we've been working towards that, but we still have a long way to go. Other items in the report we have either are working on or have accomplished as well so far. It's my understanding that the select board, I should say, excuse me, is 100% behind this report and would like to see it implemented. So there are many items remaining in the board, as you know. In order for Tim to do his work right now, we had to move about 4 rooms of items out of the way and put them in other rooms. We can't keep doing this every time a contractor needs to go in there and make a repair or whatever. So we need to get rid of, first of all, non-essential items, in my opinion. And then we need to have a plan as to what we're going to do with the remaining items, which is a different subject matter and not necessarily relevant to what we're discussing here this evening. But there's an item in there like a contractor's table saw. It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that was retrieved from the town transfer station. We have a toilet and a sink on the second floor that I don't think we'll ever use. We have hard hats laying around. There's a whole bunch of old fluorescent light fixtures. Can't see how that has any historical value or where we'd ever use them. So it's items like this that we need to get out of the Bullet House first, and then address what we'll do with the things that have some historical value. So that's why I have this item on the agenda.
Okay.
We worked a lot on this stuff, and we will continue to. One of the things I started wading this weekend into the yard sale stuff in the ballroom, and I'm going to try to continue to work on that till it's out of there. There are many other things that are around, and some of them can be removed easily, and some of them it's going to take us some time, but we're doing it. We're trying to do it and trying to work at it.
Well, as I mentioned, both June and Elaine have put in, and you've been there too, Barry, countless hours over the last 3 years trying to get from here to there. And I'm going to tell you right now, unless the situation changes, Elaine nor I are not going to go down to the Bullet House to move furniture or whatever from one room to the next every time a contractor comes in. It's not fair. It's not right. Okay. And the subject needs to be addressed appropriately. And if we need help from individuals that are on the Historical Society, we need to enlist them to help us. But we can't leave it up to people and drag it out for years. We're going to be working on the next phase of improvements with the CCAP money that we received. I haven't been able to go down in the cellar because of the lack of stairs. At my age, I was not going to try to negotiate a step ladder, but I did have Tim go down, and he gave me a listing of what's down there. All that has to be taken out before a contractor can get in there to do their work on the foundation, the cement floor, etc. He informed me that there's a table with a whole bunch of stuff on it. He left me with the impression that it didn't have much of any value. There's a couple of pieces of stairwell down there. So all of this stuff has to be taken out as well. And, you know, we can't ask the contractors to do it because that's going to cost us more money, because they're going to say, all right, we'll rent a dumpster and we'll have some of our laborers take the stuff out of the cellar and whatever else. So we don't want to get into that mode. So I think we need to step up the action of eliminating firsthand truly non-essential items that are just taking up space and having to be moved every time a contractor wants to come in to do something.
Can I say something about the removal of items? Barry, I have to say I was appalled to see that 2x3s that June and I brought out of the building for the highway department to take away. And I'm not sure about other things. I'm not exactly sure because we took a lot of stuff out this last time. And I'm not sure if I was taking out some of the same items I had taken out before. But upstairs, we found the 2x3s that we had put out for the highway department. So I'm not going to keep working.
2x3, they're blue.
Yes.
Those were supposed to go in as sleepers in the attic for to put a layer of insulation in for the upper floor in the attic, so that we'd have a insulation over the dining area, the gallery room.
Could I,
So-
June, could I interject and ask a question? A
Sure.
couple of questions, since I haven't been involved in this discussion before. One of my questions is who decides on the items? How was those people selected to decide? What criterion is used in deciding whether this is an item, whether it be a historical item or whether it be a construction item? What would the criterion be? And what would be done with the items that are being deaccessioned, or whatever one would call it? And those three things would be a concern to me before I just say to very well-intentioned people, yes, go ahead and do this. It'll clean the place up. I feel there has to be a real process. Especially
Okay.
since some of us have made donations, which of course now belong to the Historical Society and they can do what they want with it. But I think people who have made donations and so forth would like to know that there was a process that made sense.
Okay, I'd like to address Janet's concerns.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I was in my mind as we were going through this, I said to myself, what is junk? And who is going to decide what is junk? So I'm not quite sure
Can I say,
how to reach that consensus, because some of us have a different bar that we
can I just say something?
use for
Okay.
junk. But we do, in my feeling is that unless a collection item, a donated item is there, the rest really needs to be moved along, with the exception of things that belong to the Historical Society. The society has things that has a tent there in a closet. It has some things that they put out for sale if we have a venue to do that. Edie recently, a couple months ago, maybe more recently, organized the things that she could find that were on the lower level. So we've consolidated some of that, but I don't, I guess I'm not sure where the society would put important things to them, if not in the Bullard House, and that has to be addressed. But junk, in my feeling, is junk should go. It should go to the dump. If it's got some value to it, there's a swap shed there, and the people that run that are very, are very accommodating. We would need to do that soon because the swap shed will be gone. Not gone, but it will be closed when cold weather really sets in.
Can I, say,
Can I finish one thing? Just to answer another question of Janet's. We were removing building debris, old paint cans, old wiring, you name it. There's tons of junk in there. We're not touching anything from the society. And nothing that's been given. We would never do that. But the building has to be cleared of all the building materials. And there's a lot there.
may I, speak?
Yes.
Thank you. So Janet, just a couple of clarifications, okay? First of all, with very few exceptions, most of the items that are in the Bullet House don't belong to the society. All the artifacts belong to the town. The society has custody only. Second point is, one of the motions I have prepared tonight is to come up with a procedure to address exactly what you talked about. You know, how do we determine what's kept? How do we deaccession things of that nature? So that's a motion in the works here. The other aspect is when the two ladies, all right, and myself, when I was there a couple of Saturdays ago, along with Marty, okay, all right, we were making on the spot sort of agreements with trying to get stuff out of the house. And as Elaine pointed out, most of those items were strictly like construction materials, pails of old wiring and junction boxes and things of that nature, old paint cans, you know, cut-offs of this, cut-offs of that. It was that sort of thing. We weren't actually taking historical items, if you will. And there was a consensus in general terms. We weren't voting on each item because we had to get the work done in a limited amount of time. So it wasn't just going in and, you know, throwing this stuff out the door for the highway department to take out. So there are very obvious things that need to be removed, okay? Why do we need old fluorescent light fixtures? I mean, there's no historical value to that, and they're taking up space. That's just one item, and there's many more. So that's the sort of thing we need to go in and get out and put in a pile out on the lawn. The highway department's more than willing to dispose of them properly and be done with it.
But it is very frustrating to do the work and find the things stored in the house again.
Yeah, that's a major problem. When there's a consensus reached, when there's 3 or 4 people from the commission there, stuff goes out the door and you go back 3 days later and the stuff's back in the building or other places. That's very frustrating because that means we never can get from here to there.
I would think that if I were to ask to vote on, I'm not sure quite what the vote would be, how it would be worded, but if I were to vote on whether it's all right for people to go in and start throwing, you know, getting rid of stuff, I'm all for tidying things up that really are of no use to anybody.
Right.
But I would not be able to vote for something like that unless I saw some work had been done on the 3 questions that I raised.
Yeah.
So maybe we could see if other people feel the same way about that.
Well, I don't know that we need to have a motion or a vote. I think we need to have an acknowledgement by this group that something has to be done short term to get rid of from the Bullet House anything that doesn't really have a historical value of any type. And those are mostly construction type items. It was my observation at the moment. There may be other items, I don't know, but
there's a lot.
There's still a lot. And, you know, we don't need to be discussing this years from now. And that's where we seem to be heading.
Yeah, we keep talking about the same thing all the time. And we aren't making progress as well as we should be.
So maybe at some point we all have to get together at the Bullet House and make a decision on the spot. I'm prepared to do that if anybody else is. Because there's a lot of quite obvious items that are there. How about the items that I've mentioned so far? I mean,
I think we have to do
the light fixtures, the table saw, the toilet and the sink. I mean,
I think that we can agree, or that we should agree that that the items which have no value to the collection, or were donated to the collection, or are property of the Berlin Art and Historical Society, those, I think we can agree that those need to be relocated either at the dump or the swap shed or given away.
I would
The
agree.
table saw was given to us, and we've used it on various projects. And we've had a contractor come in and do work for us and use that as in the process of their work. So it's a tool to use, just like a saw or a hammer or whatever else like that, to do work that we might do and that we have been doing and we will do in the future, assumedly.
Well, on that
Some
subject,
reason or other, others don't see that that's a useful thing, but I have found it very useful, and we've used it for quite a few things.
then let's relocate it someplace else, put it in your barn, cut your plywood there or whatever. I mean, you know, a contractor who's coming in to do a job ought to be able to provide his own tools to do it. And I would be very concerned with a contractor from a liability point of view, okay, of saying, go ahead, use this table if you want to, because it's not a state-of-the-art item. It's very old. Doesn't have any of the safety features on it. So if we have a contractor in there, he uses a saw, he loses a finger. Well, you told me to do it. I used it. I didn't know it wasn't safe. So, I mean, you get into those scenarios. I don't think we need a table saw in the bullet house. All right. Just another item that has to be moved around when a contractor wants to come in to do something. If you need, if you know, if you don't want to keep it, you know, I've got a workshop and come up and cut a piece of plywood anytime. I don't think it's necessary to have it in the bullet house if we're trying to have a restoration project, principally done by contractors, to have that in everybody's way.
Can we have an agreement to meet, those of us who are able to meet at the bullet house and to take out items that do not belong to the Historical Society, that have not been donated, or are part of the collection that are just stored there temporarily? We can agree to do that at a time that's convenient for some of us, or those of us who are able to do this.
Could you restate that criterion?
Sure.
Criteria.
Yeah.
Things would be taken out that ...
Things would be taken out that, one, do not belong to the Historical Society, and that are not part of the collection, or things that may have been donated as collection items. And the table saw needs to be relocated. That's part of the agreement also. Can we agree?
What about the archival boxes?
The archival boxes are part of the collection, and we don't have a place to relocate those now. Maybe some of them we can put in the curatorial building if we restore some items, you know, in better boxes. We could use some of those.
Since this is appearing to be a very informal sort of
Agreement.
decision and agreement, yeah. And it still, I have to say, it still makes me a little uncomfortable. I like the idea. I like what you've said. And I think that, you know, we all tend to, maybe not all of us, I tend to collect things that I think, you know, a piece of string I might be able to use someday, that sort of thing. But, and I like to see those things clearly moved out so that we can use that building for what it's really intended to be used for. I don't know why I'm as uncomfortable as I am with it being a general agreement that people can just kind of go in and decide. I liked the idea of us gathering, if we're the group that's supposed to make this decision, and maybe even could, and everybody being invited to gather, and we could come up with perhaps a list of criterion together if we want it to be an informal decision. I think that there would be things that would automatically go on that list no matter who is making it up, you know, just junk that somebody never bothered to clean out. And I don't know why there would be an objection to having a list that's a guideline that anybody going in to clean out would be asked to follow. But I don't know what that's called in town meeting form of government. You know what I mean?
So the list, what you're saying is a list can be a consensual list, but it needs to precede the actual moving of the objects out.
And it needs to be really pretty clear as to what should be in the auspices of this group to decide and what shouldn't be. And I don't think it would be impossible to come up with such a list.
Okay.
And I think we almost are right here already in a way.
Carl has identified many items or some items that are not part of the collection and are not owned by the Historical Society, to my knowledge.
I mean, things, the fluorescent light fixtures were from the town hall, and at one time we thought we might use them in the kitchen, the bullet house, and that's why we stored them there. But at this time, we know that we will not use them there, so they can be gotten rid of.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety of things that are there that we have understood would go, but we just haven't gotten them out yet, that's all.
May I speak?
Yes.
So along with Janet's thinking, and I think I mentioned it earlier in the conversation, I'd like to propose that, you know, sometime after the holiday, we all meet at the bullet house with our warm clothes on. All right. We have a person with a pad and pencil. We go through the items that are there. We reach a consensus as to what needs to go out the door for the highway department to pick up or wherever. After the list has been established, then either through us or other people involved, perhaps through the Historical Society, they come in at some point with the list, which is being monitored, and help us get the stuff out of the bullet house.
Okay.
I think that's the only way it's going to get done, folks, to be honest with you.
Is that anything? Should we move? Should we make a motion?
I can make a motion. All right, let me get my thoughts together 1 second here so it makes some sense. I'd like to make a motion that the commission early in the year of 2022 meet at the bullet house for purposes of documenting an inventory. Are you keeping up with me, John?
So far.
Up with
Okay.
an inventory of non-essential items to be mutually agreed upon, which will be removed from the bullet house shortly thereafter.
Okay, the motion is that the commission, the Historical Commission, early in the year of 2022. Meet for the purpose of documenting a list of non-essential items.
Excuse me, meet at the Bullet House,
Meet
June.
at the Bullet House, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, meet at the Bullet House for documenting an inventory of non-essential items to be mutually agreed upon, to be that's the part I don't have.
To be removed.
To be removed from the Bullet House.
Shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I think that gets the essence of it.
Okay. Okay. Anything else to be said? So let's have a vote. Carl
Yes,
and Elaine
Yes.
and Janet
Yes.
and Barry
All right.
and June, I. Okay, the vote's unanimous. Next item, next Bullet House item is a mission statement. I guess I would like to say that there are lots of good details in that part of in your motion, Carl, but I think that it limits the purpose of the Bullard House to a museum to display artifacts. And I think that's part of what we hope to do, but I think it limits I think it's too limiting, and I'm not advocating that we figure this out today, but I think that more needs to be said about programming.
you could add words in other historical programs as appropriate.
To me,
We have an extensive preservation plan, which is on the books. And at any point it can be revised, but there are aspects of this that don't agree with it. And I don't think we should take hasty actions without knowing what we're doing.
Is it the preservation plan of the society or the commission?
Of the commission.
Okay. And is that available someplace?
Elaine has a copy of it.
Okay.
And it's, I mean, there are aspects of it. For instance, the Bullet House is an ancient place. But one of the things that the preservation plan notes is that the wall where the fireplace is roughly, behind that wall, virtually the house is virtually all built, rebuilt, reconfigured, changed so much that there's not an awful lot of original material there at all, very little. And that in front of that wall, there's much more material. So some of the aspects of it being a preservation project, it's more in front of that wall, we take that view of it, but in back of that wall, we take the view that we remodel it to suit what we need to do to make it a practical operation. And that we not necessarily spend large amounts of money trying to put something back that we have no proof was actually what was there. So, I mean, that's a basic philosophy we've had for a very long time on it. And I might add that the previous edition of this plan, at the time that we were writing the nomination for the National Register of Historic Places, they sent us we sent in material on the house. They sent us back a lot of questions, and one of the things we sent them was the preservation plan. And the question that came back from the Historical Commission was, who wrote this for you? We wrote it ourselves. But the point is that we did it with consultation of a couple of architectural people and others that have been working with us in the planning stages over the years. It wasn't something that we arrived at quickly. It's something we spent a lot of time creating. And therefore, I don't want to forget that by writing some new thing from people that are new to the project. I think that we need time to everybody work together if we want to come up with something like this statement. I don't think it's something we do hastily.
May I speak?
Yes.
So one of the problems I see that has been, I'm generally familiar with the plan. Elaine just reminded me what the document was, so I am generally familiar with that. But one of the problems that I see that has been ongoing, okay, and needs to be addressed, okay, and that's why I specifically said at the bottom of my motion that we need to sit with the select board, okay. And the problem as I see it, okay, and I think the select board sees it too, but I don't want to speak for them, obviously, is that we haven't taken a consistent and uniform approach to any restoration activity at the Bullet House. I know the Bullet House, like many old places, over the years have had several add-ons from several different eras and things of that nature. We have to also recognize that in order to get the Bullet House restored, okay, I believe we're going to have to rely on funding, if possible, from the Massachusetts Historical Society, which requires a 50-50 matching in most cases. I believe we're going to have to rely on the CPAC funding to get it accomplished. Both of those sources of funding require that restoration conform to the interior of the Secretary's standards. Those standards, okay, emphasize restoration and not remodeling. The quote or the IE item in my write-up here is a direct quote from the Secretary's standards. The other thing is the Massachusetts building codes, chapters 11 and 12, and the updated chapter 12, as I discussed with our building inspector, sets forth code provisions that clearly recognize what one should do or can do when restoring a historic building. This is, and I know you can't read it, sorry, this is what we have to put up with. But this is chapter 12, 2015 International Existing Building Codes. This is part of our state building codes for historical buildings. If you read the preamble to the code, it almost is in exact tune with the requirements of the Secretary of the Interior for standards for rehabilitation. This is a summary page highlighting the 10 major points of this document, which is multi pages long, which contractors are very familiar with and know how to comply with. But the second paragraph says that the historic character of the property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alterations of features and spaces that characterize the property shall be avoided. So if this is going to be our primary source of money, the contractors are going to have to apply this standard. If we're applying this standard, we can't take a donation. I'll pick an arbitrary number. Somebody gives the Historical Society or the Commission $10,000 for the Bullet House. We can't just let anybody go in there, rip out what they want, put in what they want, fluorescent lights, canned lights, paneling on the walls. That's not a restoration. That's a remodeling. This house is on the National Register, as Barry pointed out. All right. Where things have changed or first of all, I should say, where things are still there, we need to keep them there. An example that the building inspector gave us, he was involved in a similar type of project. And a stairwell that had a railing that didn't meet code because it was lower than today's standards. I'm sure that's the case in the Bullet House. No problem. They got a waiver as allowed for in chapter 11 and 12. And by the way, if you read these, all right, almost every other paragraph ends with at the discretion of the local building inspector. So he has a lot of flexibility to say yay or nay. Now, it comes down to a safety factor, the safety issue, all right? You can solve those without having to meet the secretary's standards. But whatever is there should be preserved. It was mentioned, well, there wasn't much there to begin with. That's not the case. That's not the situation. What was there should have been preserved. We've already ripped out many, many original features of the building. All right. And if we get an architect in, which we need, all right, he could tell us or suggest to us for those areas that have been removed, what would be appropriate. Pick an era, whatever the bulk of the house era is, whatever year we think it is. Oh, we ought to say, all right, let's stick with that era and, you know, put back where we can, consistent with that era. And that's not going to cost you any more than putting, you know, a piece of paneling on it, on the wall or something like that. So that's why I wrote this. We need to have a uniform approach, particularly when we consider the source of money. We have no way of getting out of these standards. If we want to get out of these standards, don't apply for CCAP money anymore. You can't get out of them. You have to do it. One of the concerns I had when I started looking into this was that the Massachusetts Historical Society has a publication. Bear with me while I thumb through the pile of paper here, please, for a second.
Keep saying Historical Society, that's commission.
All right.
I think it's
So-
the Mass Historical Commission. It's the commission.
I'm sorry. Yeah. At almost 79, sometimes I don't get it quite right. And please feel free to correct me. All right. So here's a document, reviewing compliance issued by the Secretary of the Commonwealth with respect to the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Okay. And there's language in here that says if you spend any state money, you got to comply with this. And one of the things you got to comply with is an archaeological analysis. Knowing that we're going to disturb the grounds at the Bullet House under this next project that's coming up, I was very concerned because I've been down this road before. These are very time-consuming, very expensive processes, and you get nothing out of it from a local point of view. So I asked Margaret the question, do we have to comply with this? She wasn't sure. She went back and spoke to the gentleman who's Saginaw, who's in charge of the funding, the CCAP funding. And the good news is, he said we do not have to comply with it. Because although the CCAP funding is made up of taxpayer dollars here in Berlin, as well as state dollars, those state dollars come out of the Registry of Deeds, Treasury, or whatever they call it. So they're not Massachusetts Historical Commission funds, so we don't have to comply with it. Good news, we don't have to go through that.
However,
He did say, okay, because of the complexity, okay, of this next procurement that's coming up regarding the restoration of the foundation, the drainage, and the cement floor, and perhaps a outside entrance to a bulkhead. All right. We do have to get an overseer. We didn't price that when we came up with the estimate that Tim gave us. We didn't add anything to the estimate, I should say. His estimate to do the job was $95,000. We added $5,000 to it for the bulkhead, but we didn't put anything into it for an overseer. And it's been strongly suggested by the building inspector for this next task in particular, we need to bring on an architect to write a statement of work so we can go out and get some quotes. I had proposed to Margaret, instead of a request for quote, a request for proposals. And she wasn't sure she could do that and was checking into it. The building inspector says we really need to have a statement of work prepared by an architect. So I'm getting a little off track here, but I might as well mention it now. We have at least 2 architects in town that I generally know of. There's one that lives up in the village, and apparently he has a historic background. I don't know the gentleman, but if you all agree for this next project, at least, I want to see if I can get him on board to help us write that statement of work. So let me get back to the main theme here.
Is he, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Is he on that list of,
Okay, so I don't know, but let me mention one, since you brought that up, and that's a good point. We all know that Tim Woolheater put the report together. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, and I don't know the background, he missed the opportunity to bid on the phase to replace these sill timbers. Whether he didn't get the quote, whether he got it and didn't see it, I don't know what the background is. What's done is done. So I asked him specifically a few days ago, and in this next phase, do you intend to bid that? Okay. And knowing the type of work he does and knowing he's pretty much a one-man operation, I didn't think he was going to say yes, and he didn't say yes. No, he's not going to, because that's going to require some heavy machinery and things of that nature. So he's not going to bid this next phase. However, okay, his name is on the list that Stuart gave us for an overseer. So we could bring him on board to oversee it in this particular case, because he won't be doing the work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I know about that subject. But here again, I'd like to get back to my proposed mission statement, and certainly open to discussion. If you want, as June pointed out, maybe we have to add programming or words of that effect. But we need to have, as a commission, I believe, an understanding between ourselves and the select board as to how we're going to get the board house finished. It's been 25 years. The place is still in very, very rough condition. We need to take a uniform approach. And that's the purpose of the memorandum. Let me point out one other thing, if I may. A couple of weeks ago, Elaine and I made a point to visit the Bigelow Tavern. Bigelow Tavern is located in West Boylston. Again, you probably can't see this. Well, maybe you can. Can you see that photo reasonably well?
yeah.
Okay, do you recognize where it is in West Boylston? It's on the way to, okay,
It's on 140, isn't it?
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So Elaine and I made a point to go visit this. And interestingly enough,
Oh, yeah.
okay, the docent who brought us through the building grew up in the Bullet House. Her name is Carol. Her name is Carol Parker. Her maiden name is Carol Warbin, I think it was. And she was very familiar with the Bullet House. So anyways, she took us through this facility. So they've owned this facility about as long as we've owned the Bullet House. The society owns it, not the commission. It's the historical society that owns it.
Mhm.
They raised all the money to make this restoration through private funds. They have a plaques on the wall listing all the contributors. One of the major contributors was a gentleman who just passed away that established the Russian Icon Museum in Clinton. He never lived in West Boylston. He had nothing directly to do with the town, but he saw it as an important project. He made a major contribution, plus tons and tons of other people that are listed. This place is absolutely beautiful. Let's just discuss for a few moments the handicap provisions they've incorporated here. 50 or so feet to the, I guess might be to the right of this building, okay? is a gravel parking lot. There's nothing, there's no sidewalk, nothing, lawn, some stones in the lawn. There's nothing done between the parking lot and the entrance. The entrance is right in this middle L here. I don't know if, am I showing that properly, if you can see it. That's where the entrance is.
Yeah, in the middle.
Right in the middle. We walked in there, and I did not realize until I left and happened to just look down that I walked in on a handicap access sidewalk. It was 3 inches above the ground. Beautifully done. It blended in like it was put there when this house was built. You walk into that middle section, that's their office. There was 3 or 4 ladies working on stuff there, whatever they were working on. Right adjacent to the entrance, not going around a corner or all that, was a very small handicap accessible bathroom. The point I'm trying to make, folks, okay, they have complied with all state laws, I'm sure. All the handicap applications were very, very low profile. They were sympathetic to the house. It was beautifully done, all without taxpayer dollars. We have access to taxpayer dollars, and we have access to private funds. They've owned this for 25 years. We've owned ours for 25 years. And I got to get this off my chest because it really bothers me. Current handicap ramp we have in the building. Number one, not at all sympathetic to the building. Number two, I don't know what we spent, how much we spent, or where we got the funds. But when you look at a heat register in the parlor, and you look down and you can see the ductwork, and you can see the sunlight coming in through the furnace, we haven't attended to any of those, sunshine, excuse me. We haven't attended to any of those structural issues until very recently, but we have this magnificent handicap ramp, and I'm not being facetious when I say it's something you might see in Marlborough Hospital. I don't know why we put it in at this point, for one thing. I don't know why we put it in to that extent. It's ugly as hell, excuse me, in this building, because it is not at all sympathetic to the building. We can do better, folks. We just have to try to generate enthusiasm with the Historical Society, first of all, to help us, because that's part of their bylaws. That's what they're supposed to do, is to help us. And boy, we need all the help we can get. So Elaine and Joan don't have to be there through the winter months deciding, do we keep this or throw it out over the years? We need their help. We need to take a uniform approach to the building. We need to get as many funds we can through grants or whatever, CCAP, Historical Commission, whatever, to get the monies to do what we need to do, plus donations. We need to get the townspeople enthusiastic about it. Look what they've done at 19 Carter. Look what they've done there. That building was equal or worse than what we have. And look what they've done. It's tremendous. Because they rallied people. They saw the potential. We haven't done any of that. So the purpose of the memorandum of understanding, excuse me, the mission statement rather, is to get a uniform consensus as to where we're going with the bullet house. We can't take multiple approaches. We don't have to say, oh, this room was added in 1950. It has to look 1950. There are many, many add-ons here over the years. It ought to be pick an era, get a consensus. When was most of the house built? Let's go with that era. Let's get an architect to tell us how to do that. Let's get the money to do it. Let's get it done. And we need to make sure, and I think we won't have a problem, to get the select board to say, yes, that's the direction we want to go. Because so far, the things we have accomplished, okay, they're very pleased with. And they are implementing the survey that Tim prepared. And I gotta tell you right now, when you get his supplement, it's gonna be more items with a price tag of things that have to be done there. So we haven't seen the last of what has to be done structurally. So I would like to say we should move forward. Doesn't have to be, you know, I have no pride of authorship here. I want to reach a consensus. I don't want to say this is what we need to step forward and I'm not going to budge on it. But we need to do something like this that shows the select board that we have a unified approach that we're willing to try to implement to the best of our ability.
I'm a little confused though, because in my mind, the Bullard House isn't a period piece. And I guess I would argue that parts of it need to be preserved in their final or near final stage. That it's not, sometimes it's not pretty, but that's the nature of that building. It's a motley assemblage. There, you know, we do have
So first of all, excuse me, first of all, the building is on the National Register. That's number one. Number two, my understanding is we want to make it into a museum.
it's a museum of local history. I think that's
Yes.
what's been touted.
Yeah, but there needs to be some uniformity, okay? That's one of the reasons why we seriously need an architect. You may be absolutely right, June. I'm not an architect, but we absolutely need an architect, all right, to tell us how do we implement these standards that we have to live by, the Secretary of the Interior, and potentially the Mass Historical Commission standards. How do we live by these standards, achieve a uniformity, okay, and get the place done and open? You know, because everybody's going to have an opinion, all right, on what this room should be, what that room should be. And all old buildings over the years have had add-ons or tear-downs. Look, I have been to Deerfield many times, and all the houses out there. I've been to Sturbridge countless number of times. I've been to Williamsburg countless number of times. All of these houses, many of them are used as museums. I've been to Fruitlands, right in our backyard. Yeah. We've been to the one in Shrewsbury, the Ward something house, which is absolutely beautiful, by the way, if you haven't been there, okay? All of these places have uniformity. They don't say, oh, this part was added on in 1920, so therefore it's a 1920 room, but the rest of it is 1749. It's a uniformity, and it's beautiful. And that's what all of these buildings do. And none of these buildings that I mentioned, owned by these different groups, who have to all comply with the building codes, have things that aren't sympathetic to the original architect of the house in some form.
Carl, can I ask you a question? Can I pose a question to Carl, June?
Oh, sure.
Or to anybody who wants to answer it, but this was something that, I'm just wondering, on the one hand, you're talking about, you know, maybe making a decision that we want uniformity throughout the house of a certain era. But then you also mentioned something about, that's why we need to hire an architect to decide exactly what to do in that regard. So are you open to the idea that we would hire an architect, and if the architect might come up with some way of showing more than one period, or are you really set in your thoughts on the idea of having it be uniform?
Okay, I would be open to that if that was a recommendation, okay? But here again, I haven't seen that done in any of the types of buildings that we're talking about. All right, they've picked an area and they've stuck with it. That seems to be the trend. I don't pretend to be an expert here. I'm just making what I have observed over my lifetime, visiting all these wonderful historic buildings that we have.
But
in the area.
you would be open to an architect perhaps trying to sway you in a different direction. I mean,
Sure,
you're
I'm
not
open-minded.
suggesting that yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm open-minded to this, but
There are many museums that actually do show different rooms. I'm not saying I like them as well or better. I'm
Right.
just saying there are museums that do that quite successfully. So it seems like that should remain somewhat open for
Yeah.
another
I'm
discussion.
open-minded to that, Janet, but what I don't want to see, okay? And you know, this next phase of work is not glamorous at all. Nobody's going to say, boy, that's a beautiful cement floor you put in, right? This is not glamorous work, this next phase. But when we get up into the building and start doing things there by contractors, we'll have to comply with these requirements. What I don't want to see is he's taken an architectural plan, all right, and a statement of work, and he does whatever he has to do to preserve whatever's there, okay? And then, after he's done, somebody generously says to the society or the commission, here's 20 grand. To help you finish up the bullet house. Then somebody says, wow, 20 grand. This has nothing to do with CCAP money. It has nothing to do with Mass Historical money. I can do anything I want with the money. And then we get one or two people that go in and say, oh, that would be a nice purple wall. Why don't we paint this wall purple? Or some change like that. My point is, there's no standard associated with that other money. And whoever decides what to do with that other money can go in and do something contrary to what the whole approach is being contemplated for the building. So I want to be uniform in that approach. Consider that.
How did the leadership for the Bigelow Tavern take private money and make it uniform?
We started with an architect.
They started with an architect.
And all their donors were okay with that?
Yeah, the dump from the, we didn't get into detailed discussion there, so I don't want to mislead you in any way, all right,
Okay.
with that respect, all right? We didn't get into nitty-gritty detail. But look, if I'm a donor, okay, and I'm sure this was the case, and somebody approached me and said, hey, you know, we want to restore the bullet house. Fine, here's $100. I'm not going to say, did you get an architect? Are you going to make this room 1932? Or you're going to make this part of it, you know, 1749? As a donor, I just know, oh, this is a good idea. We need to have this building restored. We need to open up to the public. Yeah, here's my $100. So I suspect that's how it went. Now, maybe they made presentations. I don't know, June, to answer your question. But normally, people who make donations don't normally get down to that level of, you know, wanting to know exactly how, other than, you know, we're going to restore it and get it back as close as we can to what it was at this particular time frame.
June, can
Well,
I steer this in a slightly different direction at this point?
Yes.
With another comment? You made a comment earlier that I wanted to pick up on too, and that was in looking at the way this was written about having tours go through. And I heard you say something about and programs.
Yes.
Tours and programs. And I think we probably are all seeing that as, yes, we could have programs there where people could come and learn about things that might not be a tour. Can we interject? Can we inject that into this statement?
Into the statement, sure.
I don't know if other people feel comfortable with that.
I think
I
that
think-
I'd like to, if I might, I've kept quiet while other people spouted. I think that we developed a philosophy for this building from the start. And we developed it over time. We modified it over time. The house was not built at once. It wasn't built at 2 times. It was built at about 7 times, or 6 times. And that's a story, just like the story of the town is a story. And there's things that are from one period and things that are from another period. Now, if you're talking about Sturbridge Village, they've set a period and they want everything in that period because that's the lesson and the story that they're telling. And the Artemus Ward house is going to be about Artemus Ward and his family and when they lived there, because that's the important person about which this whole thing revolves.
We
And
understand that.
Colonial Williamsburg revolves around the Revolutionary period and pre-Revolutionary period in Virginia in a high classical style of that time and place.
Yeah.
Because that's the story they're telling.
Yeah.
But we're there to tell the story of our town.
And do we do
Our
that
town
by,
has existed over a long period of time, and it has grown, and different things have happened. The Bullitt House in its history is remarkable in the number of different things that have happened there, and different things it's been used for in different eras.
this was never
Our
always,
job, just like it's telling, I'm sorry, but restoring it to one period misses this richness of development of the town and its story over the whole history of the town. And I'm sorry, we need to tell that whole story. We don't want to tell the story about 1790 only. We don't want to tell that story only. That wasn't necessarily the most important story to go with it. All of these other stories are part of it. And the development, we want bits and pieces of all of these different periods to be represented in the house as part of the deal. And remember that we're not there to tell the story of the Bullitt House. We're there to tell the story of the town of Berlin. That's our chief purpose. And so therefore we want to represent some of these different things to show how the Bullitt House relates to that history through its whole time.
well, Barry, may I
Not
speak?
something we're trying to freeze in one particular time because it's not the story we're trying to tell. Berlin isn't just 1820 or 1790 or 1903. Berlin is all of that, and so is the Bullitt House all of that, and therefore we want to show all of this in the development of the house. We don't want to try to show it as it. Our purpose is different than Williamsburg or Sturbridge.
Madam Chairman, may I speak?
Yes,
First of all, this house, like many houses, wasn't always a tavern. It happened to be the last owner. It's gone through many, many iterations, okay? Secondly, we have already ripped out, unfortunately, a major portion of what Barry wants to preserve. It's not there anymore. Been ripped out already. So we're going to try to recreate something that nobody knows exactly what it was, or are we going to take some uniform approach? That's all I'm saying. And by the way, I'll get back to the monies aspect of it. All right. You got to meet these standards for this next task coming up in the cellar. We get CCAP funding to do the interior once the house has been structurally made sound. All right. You're going to have to live up to these standards as well, which means you're going to have to preserve what's there, not rip out anything more. Then you got to beg the question, so that which has already been ripped out, what are we going to do there? Then you're going to need to rely on an architect to say, here's what I recommend. It might be, well, if you think that was built in 1932, maybe we should make that a 1932 style. Or let's make it nice and uniform, you know, and rely on their judgment and recommendation. But I don't.
Can I ask a question? I'm trying to see where this mission statement even asks us at this point in time, and then at this point in this project, to decide whether it's going to represent throughout history or one time. It seems to me that even though this discussion we're having is very important, and I would like to have a chance to read the Bullard House Preservation Plan before I would get too deeply involved in any of this discussion. And I'm wondering if it doesn't seem to me that this tells us one way or the other.
That's correct.
Whether we're going to have to do it. So are we I mean, I can see us getting into discussion tonight, but I would just as soon see us, I don't know, maybe postpone trying to make a decision specifically on that one question
Yeah,
until we've done a lot more work, and as people have proposed, talk to an architect about what some of the different ways people do tell stories.
Yeah.
can
Jan,
be done.
your observation is completely correct. It wasn't my intent in this document to address this subject that we've been discussing, basically. My intent is to, in the opening, set some description as how we intend to see the use of the building once it's finished. Second part of my intent was to get a uniformity from the point of view of spending future monies, all right? With respect to, if we get funding that requires the secretary's requirements, we have to do that. But more importantly, this potential for outside money, not subject to those conditions, and how do we control that? That was my intent of the memorandum of understanding. I don't want to see us putting something in per the standard and then get a chunk of money from someplace that doesn't have to comply with those standards. And then one or two people decide how to use that money, rip out more, put something in that's not appropriate, like this ramp I was talking about earlier, not sympathetic to the building, not in the right time, if a ramp is at all necessary. Timing was not right when we have structural issues with the building. I don't want monies to be spent like that, because it's a waste. To be using monies that we could use, come up with a building in a less period than 25 years to open to the public. That's the intent of my document. And once we have a consensus on it, get the selectmen to agree, that's the way we should approach it.
I'd like us to think about a mission statement, each of us, and see how to improve this, having been informed by the discussion we've just had, and bring it to the next meeting. If you need a meeting sooner than that to discuss it, then we could do that.
No, I think that's a fine suggestion.
And of course, always the work done in the Willard House has been subject to majority vote of the commission. That's always been the case, and I don't know any reason that would be ever changed.
Well, we haven't had a very full commission in many years.
Well,
Not many years, a couple of years. We had a couple of people die.
yeah.
Life goes on.
In 2016, we had a full commission when we approved this preservation plan the last time, and most of the time we have had it, but it has gotten short recent times.
Okay. So we are agreed that we will take this up
At
with
future meetings.
at the next meeting, at the next regular meeting in January. I do think we need to focus on what we're all about, and that's what Carl is trying to do here. Is that agreed?
Yes, I agree.
Janet and
Yes.
Elaine and Gary?
Yep.
Okay, do we need to say anything tonight about the foundation proposal? Can that wait until January?
Can you just give me a second to check my notes on that, if you don't mind?
Yep, that's fine.
What did I do with the agenda? I think I've already covered what I wanted to bring to your attention relative to the Massachusetts Historical Commission and the gentleman in charge of the CPAC funding, Stuart Saginaw. Okay.
So what I remember from that is that Tim Walhuter, for one, is a
He's on the
person
list.
who could advise us
Yeah,
As overseer.
as an
Oversee.
overseer.
yeah.
June, you're the one that's had the background with archaeology. Are you happy with the idea of setting aside entirely the issue of archaeology in regard to this project?
No, I'm not. I mean, if I have any official training at all, it's in field work. And I know that field work is sometimes considered valuable because of what's retrieved, but it's the information that matters. And information can be pretty humdrum, but it's part of the story as well. And I would ask us to respect whatever we need to do and should do for the archaeology.
I'm not opposed to archaeology, okay? What I don't want to do is do it to what the state says we have to do. So if we wanted to hire ourselves, let's say, as part of this task, an archaeologist once we disturb the soil, I don't object to that. Okay. What I object to, I shouldn't, excuse me, that's not the right word. What I didn't want to do, which Margaret cleared that we don't have to do, which is a good thing, is to get the Mass Historical Commission involved in doing it.
Right. That's how I took your previous comment.
Yeah, because that is very extensive and very, very expensive. And the net results to us, you're going to get a listing. We found one clay marble. We found 6,000 soda cap bottles. We found 1 million glass shards. We don't get anything out of it. But if we wanted to decide amongst ourselves, all right, that we wanted to do that for our own benefit, I had hired somebody local or whatever, or an amateur or whatever, I'm not opposed to that. I just don't want to have the state tell us what to do and how to do it and how to spend our money. And we don't have to do that. There are the rules. So that's where I was coming from on that.
This building has foundation walls that extend out from the building, indicating a previous addition, a previous amount of structure that's no longer there and hasn't been for over 100 years. We don't know what that structure was, but I'm very concerned about what happens in that area, because I'm interested in what else we could find if we're digging there that would relate to that and help to tell us the story of what may have been there previously. So I'm really concerned about the sensitivity of that area. And
this is why we need an architect to help us with that, because we're going to need drainage around the building. And it's going to be in the form of, I believe, some sort of a French drain. The building is built on a hillside, basically. All the water comes downhill and into the basement. Tim has mentioned to me that you can see the rivulets in the cellar, in the soil, in the silt buildup. There's so much water going into the cellar.
Well,
That's terrible for the structure of the house. It just
the water that goes in the cellar did not used to go there. And it's something that's happened as a result of when we put in the water from the town hall and the fact that the drainage from up back is not good.
Yeah, well,
At
I don't know the
various times
reasons.
we've fussed with it and got it so it wasn't quite so bad, but then they messed with the up back some more, and it again is there. If we could ever get the parking lot built up back that's supposed to be there for the town hall with appropriate drainage, it would solve that.
Well, listen, folks, we have a limited amount of funds. We have $100,000. Okay. We don't have any monies in that for an architect. We don't have any monies in it for an overseer. So there's a couple of answers. We have to raise some additional money from someplace else, maybe a little bit of that mitigation money that's left, or we have to cut back on the scope of work. And the scope of work as currently defined in Tim's report is necessary to improve on the structural integrity of the house, get the dampness out of it, which ruins everything. And so, we don't have a lot of choices.
I'm also interested in what Tim is going to conclude from his current studies.
That's going to be
The result of his current studies will give us a better idea of some aspects of this, and there's some possibility it could result in some change of the scope of the upcoming project.
His report is due no later than the 31st of March. His supplemental report.
March?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Well, he started working a lot sooner than we
Oh, okay.
expected.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot
Yeah.
of forward time there.
I mean, we might get it sooner. I don't know.
Yes,
But-
we might.
The contractual obligation is he
It's March.
needs to wrap it up by the end of March. So
Okay.
And
Yeah. there's nothing for preventing him to get it into us earlier. That's for sure. So to answer your question, June, I think I've covered everything at the moment. Just to summarize, you know, we have to start thinking about getting a statement of work together so we can go out to get a bid, and hopefully we can get that out in, you know, maybe late winter, early spring, and get the contractors working in the summer or fall. That's a general schedule I have in my mind. If no one objects, I would like to make contact with this gentleman, Richard Smith, who is up on the village in Sawyer Hill Road, who I understand is an architect, to see if he can't help us with that.
does the architect need to be on that list from that the CPA offered?
If he's a licensed architect, the list we got from the CPA gentleman was a list of overseers.
Okay,
If this gentleman is a Massachusetts licensed architect, then, you know, he can do it for us if he's willing to help us out here. And I understand Elaine thinks he
I
has some
think I've seen
historical.
his name connected to some other CPAC projects.
Okay.
In the state.
yeah, I guess, okay, yeah, I think it's fine for you to approach him. That's my opinion, but I would like to have the opportunity to speak to him if,
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure, well, you know, first question is, you know, can you help us? You know, that's the first question, and if he's willing to, then we gotta, you know, get together and, you know, I'm not gonna run any of this stuff on my own, folks, okay? I've run many committees. I'm currently the chairman of the Agricultural Commission. We do everything by consensus. There's no lone wolves in any of the things I've been involved in. So I just want you to be assured of that. I always try to operate through consensus.
okay, good. There is on our agenda, the next, I believe that covers all the Bullard House items.
I
The
believe-
next thing would be the town historical collection. And I can tell you that we do have a signed client agreement to go forward with the part one of the imaging project, which is to have scans of our 2 inventory notebooks from the 60s and the 70s. And Barry and I are thinking that we would like to deliver those in hand to the company Ever Present. And we can do that next Tuesday, as far as we know. And I did send out an email, and Carl and Elaine are okay with that, as far as I know.
Well, this is implementing one of the projects that was voted at the last town meeting.
Right, this is part one of that, of Article 10.
And you should also say that the prepayment on that has been worked out with the accountant and the town administrator so that we can give them the prepayment when we take the stuff.
Right, they require a deposit, and that's not normally done until the work is totally finished, but we're going to be able to comply with a deposit once the estimate has been received. So that's all set.
You said Margaret has signed the agreement?
She has,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I needed to have it renamed to the town of Berlin and not June Miller. There's another motion here. And that is from Carl, that the commission prepare and agree upon a procedure as to how and what the town should accept as items of a historical nature that are relevant to Berlin and how existing items should be accessioned. I think that's a worthy issue, but I would like to take it up at the next meeting, if that's all right with everyone.
We did start working on that early this year or last year. And somewhere we have some drafts of it, but it never was all completely finished. So we need to dig those out and see if we can't
Well,
move that along.
yeah, there are 3 or 4 things. One is, does it have value to the town of Berlin or to our local history? And 2, what is the condition of the item? 3, can we preserve it? Can we store it safely? And those are the questions I think we need to evaluate what it is people want to give us. But again, I'd like to take it up next time because we've gone on quite a long time this evening.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I'd just like to mention, there's a great deal of information and very good information that's online about how other societies have come up with these types of procedures and what they have in them.
Yeah.
And if you have a draft in the works and it's available to distribute to us, I would appreciate getting a copy of that and looking at it.
Okay, I don't know where my notes are, but we can certainly certainly make it, the custodial committee could certainly make a draft that we can look at and improve upon. And in the meantime, if any of us can take important points from other towns, that would be great.
Okay. Custodial committee, could you fill me in on that, please, being new?
Custodial committee is
Do we have one, first of all?
well, we have a custodian, and
Okay.
that's Barry. And he is, first he's elected by the society, but the commission needs to confirm his election.
Okay, so
Because-
his,
and then-
excuse me for interrupting, but his position, just for clarity, is on the society side of things, not the commission side of things.
That's right.
So my intent here with this motion is one for the commission and not for the society.
Right, okay. But that's proper. It's proper that the commission should have that in place.
Oversight, sure, and the society should be operating under any policy of the commission.
Exactly. I agree.
The custodial committee is just, has been Edie Brewer and myself.
Ronnie
And
Ackley.
Ronnie Ackley. Ronnie doesn't do a lot of hands-on things, but he is a good resource because of his background in so
And we had 2 or 3 others on it that have passed away in the last 2 or 3 years, so it's a little leaner than it was for a while. I mean, Mim Ewing was doing it, and
Alma.
Richard had a hand in it, and Alma Ackley, of course. So we had more people on it not too long ago, and if people develop their expertise on things, we can use other people too. I think that one of the things I will mention about the collection policy, that it's true that we certainly want to concentrate on things that have to do with Berlin. But in something like the clothing collection, we've got a great deal of material that we have been given and that gives us an incredible opportunity to show and share. But many of those items are things that people have bought from outside of Berlin, or that somebody had from their family in some other place that got given to us. And so in order to have a broad collection with a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting fashions or whatever, it's sometimes you can't expect that it's all going to be something that belonged to somebody that wore it in Berlin.
well, there are exceptions. And we
Yeah,
have to be-
I can understand and fully appreciate that point. But we also have to keep in mind that number one, you know, we're not the Smithsonian.
No, no.
We can't keep everything. That's their job. Okay. Number two, okay, we have a space limitation. As I understand it right now, the selectmen have said, select board, excuse me, you know, when you get old, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. The select board has said no more in the attic of the town offices. With respect to the old fire station, okay, the roof is leaking. There's discussion whether the building's going to stay or come down or whatever. The building's leaking, so you can only put it in a certain area, the old fire station.
There is a new roof being, there is to be a new roof put on it. That was
Oh,
voted
excellent.
at the last town meeting.
Excellent.
That was very heartening because that indicates some commitment for the future.
And the curatorial house building, I haven't been in it personally, but I think that's almost at capacity, as I understand.
Yes, it is.
So,
Quite full.
you know, we have to, I think, take a hard look at everything. Okay, we need to understand, first of all, what we have and where it's located, and then make some hard decisions to
Yes.
try to bring down the size of the collection, because we got things that are in multiples. You know, if we think keeping a historical society phone book from, I don't know, 1970 something, we don't need to keep a box of them. We need to keep one or two.
Right.
I don't, you know,
Through
that's
our
just an
whole bunch of
example.
those already.
That's great. That's just an arbitrary example. I mean, there are other things. I see in my mind a big row of cast iron irons.
Mhm.
I mean, do we need that many? I don't know. I'm just pointing out, you know, there's a limit to what, number one, we can collect. We ought to try our darndest to make it relevant to Berlin. And we need to weed out those things. And that's what some of these policies address with the session, right? You know, if we've got a chamber pot that's 1850 and it's got a little chip in it, all right? Somebody else has got an 1850 chamber pot, same type, that's perfect. Well, maybe we want to swap with somebody. Maybe we want to auction off the chip one and get the good one. Things like that, you know? It's not a wholesale throw everything out, but it's a controlled approach to how we know what's in the inventory and how it's relevant, so that it can come out and people can see it and not just store it someplace.
Mhm.
You know, what's the purpose of having a warehouse full of stuff if nobody knows what it is, or nobody's looking at it, ever gets to see it?
Condition is an issue because
Condition as well.
if one of the objectives is to have people use these resources, and the condition of an item is too frail or it's damaged and you can't exhibit it well, then I think that we should address that as a criterion.
I think
For
it's,
the accessioning, yeah.
I think for a fundraiser, and it would take a lot of work, with the funds that could be used to improve the bullet house, we could have a big yard sale auction or something like that on many items that are either duplicate or are not relevant to the town or will never be used or can't store it anymore or whatever. I think that's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Not a pile of stuff, get any money.
Well,
Anyway.
I'm game for that. A vintage sale will get a lot of enthusiasm and it's a good press event too. So the next item on here is demolition delay, and I don't believe Barry found any permits that would require demolition.
My current difficulty with no computer at home. I've gotten into the computer here now in the town offices, and I've gotten, I did review things with Leanne, and there was nothing new. that needed attention that I hadn't already dealt with before. And I also have got it so that I can get in to check that from time to time. So we're in tone there. Everything we've seen lately has been new construction. Somebody wants to change the kitchen and add on the back or something, and mostly in buildings that are much younger than we have to deal with. So at this point, there's nothing for demo delay that I know we need to address.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Any other
Yes,
topics?
there is one item I do need clarification on.
Okay,
I had prepared a memo to go to Margaret. That number one informs her that we have agreed. I was a little presumptuous there, but I figured I had to get this stuff out in writing to make it easier to have a discussion. I have a memo that isn't addressed at the moment, but it is intended to be addressed with Margaret. I have gone over it with Margaret last week in anticipation of the meeting. And the memo covers transmitting to her our approval for the stairs. It addressed other board house maintenance issues that need to be attended to. It makes recommendations relative to cold sensors in the building. When I was over there, when Tim was there, coincidentally, the alarm company showed up to check out the alarm system at the bullet house. I asked the technician if the current system had the capability of detecting when a temperature went to a certain level. Would it alert somebody so that somebody could go, check out the furnace? Current system does not have that. He mentioned that sensors are needed on the second floor and the first floor. Very easy to install and economical. We didn't discuss price. So that's in the memo. Coincidentally, again, when I went down to meet with Margaret, our temporary highway superintendent, Fred Cummings, happened to be in the hallway, and he brought up the subject that he had just talked to the Norrell, the fire alarm people, and he was already in the process of cutting paperwork to buy the two sensors. Just happened to be coincidence. So that's in the memo as well. Maintaining the furnace, based on information June got, apparently nobody's cleaned the furnace since 2017. It's not efficient with spending.
right, that's what she told me.
When we had, when Keith was the superintendent, it was being done every year.
Oh, that's the way it should be done. That's what I'm suggesting.
It slipped through the cracks with the last superintendent, but I talked to Fred about that myself, and I also brought up about the fire alarm, and the fact that the fire alarm guy was there is an indication that he had indeed gotten him to come. So I'm glad to see that, because it hadn't been in the pile of things that was being handled regularly.
Yeah.
In general, I mean, keep in mind that the bullet house is under the jurisdiction of the Historical Commission. And if we want to get budgeted money to do repairs with, then we need to put in the budget ourselves, because it's our building.
Well, I don't know that that's, first of all, it's town property. That's clear, right? Is there any
That is
disagreement there?
correct.
Okay.
But
So-
it is under the jurisdiction of the Historical Commission as voted by the town when it was acquired.
Okay. And if you go to the Massachusetts law that defines what commissions are supposed to do, and I have a copy of it in the pile, all right? One of our major things that we're supposed to do is to make recommendations to the select board. Just because it's under our jurisdiction doesn't mean we have free will. It's town property. I can't go in there, take something out and sell it. It's town property. So whatever we plan to do, we need to comply with what our charter is under state law. And that charter is, preserve the artifacts in town and make recommendations to the select board. We're not living in a vacuum here. we need to bring to their attention any major decisions that we would recommend with respect to the board house. And that's why I have back into the item we tabled this evening, mentioned we need to have a meeting with the select board on that subject. Now we've tabled it, so I'm not going to bring it up again. But just because it's in our, whatever you want to call it, custody or whatever, all right, we can't live in a vacuum. Major decisions need to be brought to their attention before they're implemented, because that's what we're supposed to do under state law.
So to recap some of
So,
your.
I would just like to go forward with the memo. Is that the only reason I brought it up? We didn't address it in any way. It's all straightforward factual information. And I just want to make sure that, there's no concern about sending it in to Margaret. She's already read it.
Well, you said that Fred Cummings is going to take care of the cold sensor.
Yeah. So timing has caught up with things. I don't think we need to change the memo. It's in the works. We're making a recommendation. I made a recommendation, and it's going to be implemented. So, and she knows about it. So,
Did you also say something about about Northborough Oil?
I merely said, no, I didn't mention Northborough Oil. I merely said, okay, with respect to the furnace, okay, based on the information you sent out, June, that it hadn't been done since 2017, okay?
Right.
And that we need to have annual maintenance of the furnace, which I guess was done in the past, which is a good thing to make the thing efficient, make sure all the things are operating properly and the filters are changed and things of that nature. And I recommend that it be done, at the end of a heating season, late summer, early fall, before you get into the heating season, excuse me. And also, let's not do anything until we get a set of stairs in. So that's the only thing I've mentioned in the memo.
Okay.
Fred indicated when I asked him about the matter of the regular furnace cleaning and stuff, that I guess all of the buildings were scheduled for February, March. And I just said, well, do make sure that this one's on the list.
The only point here, folks, is, we need to make sure the selectmen through Margaret be aware that we're concerned that certain maintenance things should be done. It takes money to do it. Somebody needs a budget, all right, to do those things in the future. And, with respect to the furnace, that needs to be done. You want to clean it in March, before the heating system season is over, fine. You want to do it every March, fine. To me, it ought to be done before the heating season starts. But, that's not my decision. My only concern is, let's bring it to their attention. Let's be proactive. We're supposed to make recommendations to the board, and that's what we're doing here. That's all. They can ignore it. I don't. What am I going to do? If they ignore it, they ignore it. But at least we've made an effort, and we brought important things to their attention.
Do you think that you should, the memo doesn't actually suggest a June maintenance?
No, I'm not going to pin down a month. I say, be maintained annually after each heating system. So any, season rather. So you turn your furnace off, what, maybe May? So between May and when you turn it back on in October or November, that's when it should be done. That's when homeowners normally do it. That's when I do it. I don't wait till 3/4 through the heating system to
Okay,
maintain.
I see your sentence now. It's just in a different paragraph.
It just has to be done annually, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can do it anytime they want annually.
And that's in, the town has an oil account, and I believe the service of the burners is part of that oil account for all the town buildings.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
It's true with some other things like the fire alarm.
Yeah.
And those things, as long as we get them, so they get into the system and they get done with all the others, that's fine.
Yeah, but the point is, in this particular case, it hasn't been done since 2017. So
That's correct.
Okay.
That's all we're
We'll
doing.
need to be better advocates. And
I'm just trying to make them aware.
You the other day, I talked to Fred.
I saw you talking to him, but I didn't know what your conversation was about.
Anyway,
Okay, so so
I'm just trying to
this
change
memo, you just want,
shit.
validation that this memo goes to Margaret, is that right?
I just want you to be aware of it, that's all, it's, we don't need to vote on it or anything, just be aware of it, that's all. She, like I say, she's already read it and has no problem with it.
I don't get this.
Well, she's fine with establishing a budget line item for maintenance if one has not already been established.
She's fine in considering everything I've raised in the memo. Now, will it be done? I don't know, but she's at least fine with acknowledging, yes, this is something we should probably consider. It's a recommendation. They don't have to do it. They don't have to, but I think if we're gonna maintain the building now, or once we start making improvements to the building, those things have to be maintained. We can't put a coat of paint on the building someday and walk away and say, we never have to worry about that again. Yeah, you do. So there has to be some money identified for that type of maintenance. I don't care where it's done. Highway department, select board, our budget, I don't care. But let's make sure we recognize the need to do it. That's the whole intent of the memo, and she has no problem with it.
Okay. But right now, you don't really know if there's a budget line item for
I have
maintenance.
no idea. I have no idea.
Forget it.
That's why I say if not already established, maybe there is one. I don't know. And if there is, they don't have to take any action.
Okay, but
But
we don't know right now.
They have building maintenance, a general building maintenance account. That's the kind of thing that they're gonna get those census with. They've got money that they can spend on town buildings when they need to.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true, Barry. And I would, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that's the case. But maybe we need a specific line item for the billet house to make sure things get done for the billet house. Again, folks, it's just a recommendation. All right. Margaret didn't say, oh yeah, we have a line item. Oh no, we don't. She didn't even seem to know herself. They got to look into it. And if they say, oh, we don't need to do it, then it's fine. Merely a recommendation.
Okay. All right, any other comments on that? I'm fine with it. Do we need to vote?
Is there anything else in the agenda?
I don't have anything else, folks.
There were two other things. One, if you'll just agree, we can move along quickly. And that is to have a special meeting outside of our regular meeting schedule to discuss a preservation plan for historic assets in the town of Berlin. And we can do that as a group, or if we want, at our next regular meeting, we could appoint a couple of people to spearhead that and then bring their thoughts to the rest of us. However you want to do that, but we do need to consider the issue of having a preservation plan for the town of Berlin. And the other.
And that's a plan that has to do with many historic resources in the town, not just town-owned stuff.
That's right.
Your old house, my old house, the hop house up on Sawyer Hill Road, all kinds of things that that one can come up with that are historic assets in the community. That's a really big kind of plan.
It is a big plan.
There's one thing that I always bring up at every meeting, and that is my concern, and that's the Hearst House.
Yeah.
Is it agreed that a special meeting devoted to that, or would you rather have a couple of people start to spearhead that and then meet?
I think we need to have that meeting. It's already in the works. You're talking about,
I'm talking about a meeting outside of a regular meeting, just to talk about a Berlin, the town of Berlin preservation plan.
Do we have an outline or a guideline or?
I think I'd like to suggest that we try to get hold of a couple from other towns
I agree.
and spread them to our group. So that, and take turns reading them and so forth,
Yeah.
so that we can have some basis on which to discuss this before we meet on it.
Well, I signed up for a webinar on preservation plans.
Okay,
And
Have that
to tell you the
information.
truth, right now, I don't know the date of that, but I think it's still open, so others could join that webinar, and you can join it live or you can join it as a recording. So there's a lot of possibilities.
is
there.
it this, is it Mass Historical Commission?
Yes,
Is it free?
yes,
Okay,
yes, it is free.
so let us all know when that date is. Maybe we can, some of us can consider doing it
Okay,
too.
I'll forward, I think I already forwarded it to Janet.
I like Barry's idea as well. You know, no need of reinventing the wheel. If
No,
there are other groups out there that have prepared such plans, it's a lot easier to tailor them to our needs instead of trying to reinvent everything.
yes, and that
So-
webinar will be helpful. I think mostly we need to identify our historic assets so that we can plug into the best plan. The last piece of business was something that Carl brought up, and that was reviewing the annual report. And I believe we do that every year.
Sure we do.
Barry, as chair, sent us his annual report, and then we were expected to let him know if he forgot anything or needed to change anything.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up because I'm new, all right, and I didn't know what the protocol was. And I just want to have enough time and opportunity to review it and discuss it before it goes to print. That's where I'm coming from.
Hopefully they'll give me a heads up, some lead time so we can get a good report out there.
Well, we'll want to, it can be started anytime. And we will want to have a draft of it in early January so that we'll have a chance to review it and talk about it prior to a submission, probably late January when they require it.
Okay, and the final item tonight is, do you want to have Zoom only meetings going forward? Because I need to change, if that's the case, I need to change the posting anyway. Not because we can't meet Wednesdays at 7, but because I have to get rid of the location as being in person and Zoom.
Personally, given the uptick in COVID, given that we won't have to cancel any meetings due to foul weather, so that we don't have to cancel and reschedule and can continue with the business we need to attend to, I'm in favor of doing Zoom.
Okay.
Zoom
Anybody
only,
else?
Zoom only.
Zoom only. Anybody else want to amend that, or?
I like the idea too.
Okay, all right. So I will repost
Just have James handy.
Wednesday, 7 p.m. Zoom only.
Second Wednesday.
Second Wednesday, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Each month at 7. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Carl,
Aye.
Elaine,
aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Barry,
All right.
June. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah.